Here we are.
Here we are, another Winging It episode. Today we are not only going to another country, we are going to another time zone.
Yes, we have Robin Storey,
Yep.
aka Rapoon,
Rapoon.
who is we are very fortunate to be joining with to talk about his music, his art,
Yep.
his career.
Robin was founding member of Soviet France, who for me was really exciting discovery back in the mid-'80s.
Yes, and for me as well. And as you know, Charlie and I are members of our own experimental music band, Body in Question, and I think Soviet France and Rapoon are significant influences on the trajectory of our explorations musically.
There's so much to talk about. It's like 40-year career, I guess, in experimental music and art, and I don't know, maybe a starting point is just where you are now, like in terms of how the pandemic is affecting you. And I think I might have even seen some COVID-inspired paintings on your website.
Yeah, I did some isolation paintings, yeah.
Isolation paintings, right.
Yeah. To be honest, there's some aspects of lockdown that I actually liked.
Yeah.
I've realized I'm not, there's certain aspects of sociability that I could do without. And in the shops, people in your face and things always felt, uncomfortable. So
Robin, a number of artists we've talked to in the past few months have talked, like you, a little bit positively about the impact of the lockdown on their work. I think several of the artists we've talked to, they work in a lot of seclusion, and isolation is part of their lifestyle. So they found that they were able to, if not thrive, at least wax very creative over that time period. How has the lockdown affected your creative work at all, in a good or negative way?
I've been really busy.
Yeah.
I think it's affected in a positive way more than a negative way. It's been hard to adjust to family circumstances because my wife's had to work from home, and I'm used to having those daytime work hours to myself.
Yeah. I thought maybe we would start talking about visual art and then work our way back to like your early career with Soviet France, and then of course Rapoon, which is sort of seems to be the bulk of your work over, I guess, 30 years. One of the things, so Marc and I collaborate on lots of things. We have a music group together, we do art together. We have a buddy who's very much into kind of Neolithic, and I think Marc is too. So when we were looking at your work, it's like, I personally see this interesting play between like early art, Neolithic, and then contemporary art with kind of abstract.
Yeah, gestural, where the gestural meets sort of the glyphic, symbolic aspect of some of the rock drawings and so forth in the UK. And I understand there are like standing stones with rock glyphs nearby.
Yeah, well, I grew up with standing stones and structures which were had either Neolithic markings on them or Nordic runes, because with the area I lived in was invaded by Vikings from Norway rather than the other side, which this side was more Swedish and Danish.
Right.
Yes.
And the stones, they weren't treated as precious objects, they were reused to build things. So you would find houses with a piece of ancient stonework built around in sometimes just as part of a wall, and there'd be old carvings in it and everything.
Yeah.
But where I live now, on this side of the country, I've got a good friend who, because I don't drive, but a good friend who takes me out into the hills, and the hills are covered with table stones on the tops of the mountains, and they're just, every inch of them is carved. Neolithic carving.
It must be so amazing to be surrounded by so much deep ancient history and all of these wonderful artifacts. How does that feel? I mean, we're in Toronto. I think our history goes back about 100, 200 years at the most.
Well, the European history, the indigenous.
Indigenous goes much earlier, right? But you know, in terms of, I guess, from our cultural standpoint, we're not that deep historically.
No.
How does it feel to be surrounded by such a rich, so much antiquity?
It's a real privilege, you know. I really love the countryside and the landscapes of the north of England. They're totally embedded in everything, in the paintings and in the music and everything.
Yeah, it's not some romantic notion, you know.
It's a physicality. I went back recently with a friend who was brought up in London, and as I said, because I don't drive, I had a project in Germany where I needed to do some filming where I grew up. So this friend said he would drive me out there, and it's on the Solway Firth. It's a body of when the tide's out, it's just mud, but when the tide's in, there's a huge body of water there. And we walked out 2 or 3 miles, and he said, you know, he started to get worried, and he said, you're not worried that the tide will come in? And I said, no, because I can smell when it's going to come in. And even though I'd been away for years and years, it all came back to me, you know, the whole interconnectedness with the actual earth and the cycles of the earth. And I really love that about that I've been able to grow up in such a situation. I would have hated, I think, to grow up in a city.
Well, and
I feel very uncomfortable in cities, apart from visiting sometimes.
So that does explain. So this is a good leap back to my first encounter with Soviet France was like mid '80s, and I bought Gris, the one that came in the pile, and the sound to me was some in between place. between, you know, this world and not quite the spirit world, but it's not the waking world.
Not the
Um,
physical world.
and it does. It seems like beyond time, or it's almost like you're listening to sound being transported through, you know, through the cosmos from some ancient time.
That's great to hear. The beginning of Soviet France was really special time. There was a very close connection, which wasn't it didn't need to be explained to each other. It was well, you know, more or less like transcended words or the physicality of us. It just was a strong connection of both what we were trying to do, which we didn't need to explain, and as people. You know,
Right.
I think it was, you know, quite a unique time when it happened. I'm not sure it would have happened a few years later, or
Right.
you know,
Right.
it was just circumstantial. It was
Right.
very
How,
lucky.
how did you and your partners with Soviet France, how did you um, come upon the kind of music that you were making, this very experimental ambient kind of sound, um, with some edginess to it at times? The industrial music, the industrial sound, noise, ambient, experimentalism. How did that come about? Uh, this is the early '80s or late. This is the early '80s.
Very early. Well, we met in
Music at the time is sort of
1979.
post-punk is sort of the cutting edge at that point. Punk and post-punk, new wave, and then there's you guys.
Yeah.
Actually,
Take
Well,
it even to a further extreme. How did that come about?
and before you answer that, I mean, there was stuff happening with Nurse with Wounds, Robbing Gristle, and these
Yeah.
other bands. Were you aware of them? I guess.
Yes.
well, personally, I wasn't. I think that's maybe another aspect of why it worked. I've actually just been writing about this because it's I've been asked to, you know, and so we met by chance, and Ben and Peter, the other two guys that were founder members, had been in a punk band, and it was at the tail end of punk because this was '79, and they were kind of. I actually saw them without ever knowing them. I actually went to this show once, and there was this weird band on. I think there was seven of them in the band, and they had very distinguishing features. He had some crazy hairstyle, and you just couldn't help missing him. And a friend, I was working at a art print shop, and a friend there said she knew these two guys that had a deal to make a record single as a punk band, but they'd all fallen out and split up, and the two guys that were left didn't want to do punk music anymore. So I went along and we talked about just vaguely about some music and what kind of music I liked and things, and then we just played a few times together, and then went and made this record, which turned out to be the first album. And so that was only a matter of a few weeks before we did that album. And Ben worked in a record shop, and he was very well aware of Throbbing Gristle and all the other industrial and post-industrial people.
Sure,
I hadn't a clue. And Peter was very, very young, and he liked heavy metal.
Okay. Yeah.
He was really into heavy metal stuff.
Yeah.
So somehow, whatever influences we all had came together in a very sort of abstract way, and I think we weren't trying to emulate anybody at all.
Right. Well,
just trying to play together naturally, in a kind of ritualistic way.
And it's a unique sound, even all these years later, with all the what has come after, with all the different permutations of ambient, experimental. Soviet France still is a unique sound.
Yes,
that's great. It's nice to hear.
Yeah.
And you say you describe it as abstract, which I would agree. I mean, I kind of refer to this kind of music as abstract music. It's almost the equivalent of pure abstraction in the visual arts. Is that what your goal was and remains? Is it to create sort of an abstract kind of sound that is the equivalent of abstract visual art, or is there something? Is that part of it?
I think the goal now is just to not rule anything out. I'm not really trying to do anything in any specific genre or anything, just make something that's interesting to me while I'm making it. And it still has to be a kind of immediate process.
Right.
So sorry, go ahead, Charlie.
Yeah. So my understanding is your process is you do a lot of improvising, record, create samples, and then that's the way we play, Mark and I. It's just you kind of create it on the fly. We always improvise everything.
Yeah, with Soviet France, we recorded everything we did.
Oh, sure.
As we did it.
Sure.
And there was some compositional elements to structural to it afterwards, but most of the time it was just as it was.
Yeah. So improvise and then kind of and was it you're doing like the tape deck to tape deck kind of editing? Yeah.
How much might have been left out of the finished recording? I'm really curious about that, because I know, Charlie's smiling at this question, because we know we have created hours and hours and hours of sounds. And somehow that has to be distilled down to something less than hours and hours to create a CD or a piece or a work. How much is left out of your work? And what do you do with it? Is it just left there forever, or does some of it get recycled back into a later project?
Yeah, it's changed a little over the years. Sometimes some way of working works, and sometimes I have to stop myself and just I alternate between music and painting deliberately. And if I feel that something's not happening right in music, I go and do some painting. And I've lost, I know at least 4 albums that I can't, because I'm hopeless at cataloguing things. I might have I'm trying to get better, but there might be something that I did, and then I decide to suddenly play something and I really like it, so I just turn on record and I don't know which session it's in afterwards. I can never find it again.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know whether that happens to you, but I try not to. I've got template set up now,
Okay.
so it's very quick to get from where I am to just a brand new session, and so I tend not to lose stuff as much as I did in the past, but there's still hours and hours of
Sure. Yeah.
material that
All on your hard drive somewhere.
yeah, and there's hours and hours that I don't know whether I've used it or not, because I can't remember every album, every tune on it, every song on every album.
So when you're making a CD, do you work in Pro Tools? I believe you do. Right?
Yeah.
Yes. Do you just sort of like improvise the first, and go like while you're recording in Pro Tools, as opposed to,
Yeah.
having it all
just
set
start
up?
playing,
Yeah. Right on.
Do you work from a preconceived idea, or
No,
are you
I
going to start with
I usually wait for the idea to come.
Yeah.
Okay.
I do some things, and then I think of an idea of what that might be about, or where it looks like it's going.
Airstrikes. Airstrikes.
Now, I noticed a number of your more recent CDs in the last 3 or 4 years have had a kind of a political aspect to them. The one about the little rocket man and airstrikes. Now, these don't sound entirely like something that's just kind of coming out of nowhere. These sound they're a little bit political. Did you go in with an intention of creating sort of political pieces, or did that come after you listened to the piece?
Sometimes, yeah, I've watched something on the news and it's really pissed me off. Or, yeah, it's pissed me off. And I record a lot of stuff from TV and radio, because you never know what you might find. There's always
some of the best stuff, eh? Just found phrases and vocal patterns and things like that. Yeah.
I got a whole album from. I was in New York with a friend, and he took me to a music shop, and it was beyond my price, the stuff.
Yeah.
But they had a box of old tapes, cassette tapes, and it was 50 cents for 2, I think. And so I picked one up, and it had little scribbles on it, and one of the scribbles was a person's name that I knew.
No way.
And I thought, so I picked that one,
Yeah.
and I picked another one. And the one with the person's name that I knew turned out to just this absolute treasure trove of audio talking. It was like voiceover stuff, and it was a radio show. So, and it lent itself to comedy as well. That's Andre on the Line.
Yeah.
found on one of the Soviet France albums. It's Iostra.
Okay.
We found a piece of 1/4-inch tape blowing down the street one day,
Yeah.
and made a tape loop out of it.
Yeah.
And it was this beautiful mix of Asian music, and somebody had recorded over it, so there was just these voices in the background. It was just a wonderful loop, completely random.
Yeah. That's the kind of the sonic alchemy of that process.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to talk about the importance of visuals. Like, so when you do a show, I've watched quite a, hours of Raccoon, live on YouTube, and you always have really amazing visuals behind you. Just wondering, like, what that, the meaning and value of that for you, or I'm assuming you're creating them. And it just, the sound, the visuals, as well with your painting, all create, they're not different, they're all part of a continuum or a composite or a synergy of a vision, it seems to me.
Yeah, that's right. It's also, not an exactly dynamic performer, so there isn't an awful lot to watch, which is why I love working with dancers, because the attention is on somebody else.
Right.
So the visuals are meant to be a substitution and a way of connecting with the music.
Something to look at.
It gives the audience something to look at rather than a guy standing behind a laptop, right?
Exactly.
How many times have we been to Charlie where that's all we get to see? Yeah. But I totally get it. I totally get it.
But often the visuals are like, they're not necessarily like they're just there for that reason, as opposed to
they work with the music,
an extension of the music.
Yeah. Yes.
They're done deliberately. They're meant to stand up on their own as well.
Right. And some of them, there are, I believe you kind of publish them as videos.
It's also another way of using paintings in a different format, and you can find different visual connections yourself, like myself, just using them in a different way. Exactly. And so everything feeds back on itself.
It all it feeds back on itself, but I find it magnifies when I'm listening to the sound. So often when I'm listening to sound, especially experimental electronic, I close my eyes. But with yours, you want to look and go into it and have the music kind of envelop you. Your music, your visuals, all have for me what I would call a psycho-spiritual quality to them, and I don't, I guess I'm curious as to whether that's intentional or that just comes out of that's who you are, or that's what your interests are. I wonder if you could speak about that.
That's who I am, really, and what my interests are. Yeah.
Right. Well, so I guess that's a lead into, like, do you have interest in, I know on your website, accompanying one video was some quotes about Brahman, and, it's a very, I don't know, a collective consciousness and things like that. Something that both Mark and I are, like, really into, so curious.
It's the nature of reality, and how you perceive it, and what governs how you perceive it, and how much how much you are part of it, or just
Right.
at the mercy of it, or whatever.
Right. So I'm guessing you've been interested in study things like, world religions, belief systems. That's a feeling I get anyway from the work.
Yeah,
It's not overt. It's inferred,
No.
maybe.
Yeah, it's to do with the earth, really. Yeah. Because of all of these like ancient stuff,
Right.
I had a really interesting experience in Texas, for the first and only tour that I was in with Soviet France.
Right.
And we visited a place called Sacred Mountain. I can't remember what cities it was near or anything,
Right.
but it was out in the desert. And I didn't feel that comfortable with the idea of being a tourist in a native Indian religious site of
Right.
religious significance. But I didn't have any choice really, because the idea was to stay there overnight and sleep out on the rocks and stuff.
Right. Okay.
It was a big plateau, not as big as Uluru in Australia.
Right.
Similar format, flat top plateau. And because I didn't feel that comfortable with it, I went off on my own and sat on the edge, looking out over the desert. And then all of this kind of cinematic Spielberg stuff started happening with clouds.
Wow.
And I thought, I can honestly say, well, I guess somebody must have given me some peyote or something. Slipped me something. And
or you're picking
there
up
was the
energy, the spirit energy.
Yeah, well, it was this like visionary experience, which I wasn't expecting at all. This was completely out of the blue. Right. But the really interesting thing was, halfway through this visionary experience, which was kind of like downloading a culture in fast, super fast, high fiber,
fiber optic download.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, there suddenly was the brakes put on. It just suddenly stopped, and I heard this voice say, "He's not from here." And
stop the download.
Yeah, it's just like, whoa, yes, it was exactly that. And then so we're like, where's he from? And I was physically and mentally transported to this stone circle in Cumberland. And whatever it was, whoever it said he's not from here, went, oh yeah, that's where he's from.
Right.
And then I was back on this rock in Texas, feeling, and everything went, and I was feeling really like, wow, that was weird. did that really happen?
A mystical experience.
Yeah, it was a amazing one, but it was also really interesting because what was behind that?
Yeah. Well, and so that's exactly that's what I call psychospiritual. It's just what we perceive as so-called reality. Whatever we could talk for hours about that, whether it's projection, whether what that is.
Or alternative universes too. There's times when stuff that's happened to me hasn't happened to the people around me.
Right. Sure. Yeah.
And we've both been in the same supposed time frame, and we've parted ways and then come back together. And it's sometimes that's okay, and other times it's caused problems.
I find with your music and with your visual art, the sounds that you're creating. Charlie and I have talked about the sounds that we create, which is, you know, to some extent, of course, inspired by your own music and your contemporaries. But we talk about the music as being very close to pure sound, like it's just this pure physical wave that's happening. And I find with your music and the visual components of your art, your creative output, that you're hitting at some kind of pure reality, a reality that underlies all of this stuff that we have in this contemporary life of ours. But so what I find interesting about some of your pieces is that you'll be listening and there'll be these surges and these rising and falling, these pure wave sounds, again, getting to the core of what reality might be. And then there's a voiceover coming from a radio source that's very much about contemporary life. And that frisson almost, that the contrast between those is startling, but striking, but also that's what life really is. I mean, that's what we live. We're living something that, on the one hand, we've got the noise from contemporary culture and politics and, you know, Boris and Donald and all of those guys going on. And then there's this undercurrent as well, the deep current. And I feel like your music and your art captures all of that.
Thanks, because that's pretty much what I was aiming for.
I have one CD that has like a weather radio voice, right? Easterly, whatever. I don't remember what it's saying, but it's great. It's like information, but in the context of a Rappoon song, it's almost mystical.
Yes.
Yeah. Is it if it's the English shipping forecast?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a kind of it just, for me to listen to it, it was like some kind of religious chant, a kind of reassuring reading of that life was okay, you know.
Right.
But for the real people that are stuck out there in the oceans, it's vital. It's vital that they know that.
Yeah.
But it was delivered in such a beautiful way that I felt the words transcended what the purpose was. And but the purpose was also very vital.
So, life-saving, right?
Yes, yeah.
Vital. Yeah.
I'm curious, when you perform live, how do you replicate a piece? Do you replicate a piece? Do you take a piece that's already been composed, recorded, produced, and posted as a CD, and then perform it live, or do you simply improvise new material on the spot?
It's always new. But sometimes I begin with sometimes recognizable samples, a few recognizable samples from work that I've done, just as a kind of intro for myself. And then everything else after that is sound manipulation or created live, played live or recorded live and manipulated live.
Right. You have so many streams of sound. So, I mean, the way Marc and I work is Marc tends to he used to play drums or keyboards, and I have about maybe 6 or 7 streams of sound that I mix.
Yeah.
You're doing everything with the, you know, the beats, the various things, plus some live
Well,
stuff.
it doesn't work for me unless I'm completely in the moment.
Yeah, of course.
And I have to. It's kind of like a detached listening as well, because I'm also experiencing what's happening while I'm doing it. And if I I couldn't just play the same things. I mean, I couldn't play them anyway. For like one-off things, yeah. But it would just. I did actually. For a performance in Germany for a very specific venue and very specific type of performance, I did make what we might call a backing tape. But after 5 minutes, I just gave up. I can't do it. You know, I'm just like, it doesn't feel right, and I just don't want to do it.
It's like having the training wheels on the bike.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Every performance is going to be different. Every performance
Yeah.
has a completely different feel, sound to it. Well, it'll be a brand new pieces each time.
Yeah. There'll be some recognizable elements in there,
Yeah.
but they're reconstructed and deconstructed. Yeah.
You wouldn't sit down and say, okay, now I'm going to perform for you, Little Rocket Man.
No.
Okay.
Some people have asked me to do that.
How do you
I don't
do
know
it?
where to begin.
Oh, right.
Yeah, I think I said earlier, there's so much that I can't remember.
Yeah.
And I did a radio interview once, and it was in, I think, Czechoslovakia, and there was some music playing before the
Right.
guy, and then he asked me some questions. But while the music had been playing, I was thinking, I wish I'd done this. This is great. And then he asked me about the music that had been playing. I said, did I do that? Wow. I couldn't believe it.
That's an exciting discovery or rediscovery, yeah.
I tell Mark about that. Sometimes I'll listen to our music. I mean, I don't know if you listen to your own music.
Yeah, it's sometimes.
I forget that we did it.
Yeah, it's very occasionally you can be like a listener, not a critic.
Well, we'll also find when we're recording or recording, sometimes when we're performing too, but the equipment almost seems to take over at times.
Oh.
We're looking at each other. Are you making that sound or am I making that sound? Where is it coming from? And it's the best feel.
We could never replicate that because quite literally,
That used to be.
It's an exciting feeling, but it's also kind of humbling too, because in a way you just don't know where this is coming from, and you're kind of part of it, but you're not master over it.
We're channeling it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That used to be one of the greatest things about with Soviet France. That happened all the time. Nobody knew who was making it.
Right. Yeah, I guess you have no choice when you're doing solo. You kind of go, but you might not know. Like sometimes, even when I'm doing solo stuff, I'm not sure what source the sounds are coming from and what effects they're going.
That does happen. Yeah.
How would you compare working solo with working in a band format or in a combination format with other people?
Oh, it's different, I think solo stuff, I'm kind of control freak, but also the worst critic as well.
There's no one else to blame, right?
Exactly, yeah, but I still enjoy working with some people. It's like if it's pleasurable, like Mark Spivey.
I was going to say, I'm just thinking about Reformed Faction, right? That's what.
Yeah, and it's just always just a pleasurable experience, and it's not particularly, we don't particularly choose any direction. We just kind of like know that there's an open format, whoever does what would take the lead from that. And so that's a very different experience to doing stuff on your own. I just couldn't never have fitted in with a band that did songs or anything.
Yeah.
For the same reasons,
So
But,
I'm wondering, we should probably, bring things to an end. Wondering what's upcoming for you, either visually or as Rappoon, or
sonically.
do you have any projects coming up for people to look for?
Yeah, there's a lot of new music coming out, as well as reissues, vinyl stuff.
Right.
And I am writing my autobiography, believe it or not, for an art book that's supposed to be coming out next year, because it'll probably be next year before I've finished it.
Right. I'll look forward to that. And
that should be Soleil Moon.
And how about the paintings?
I paint all the time, but there's not really any particular exhibition or anything that I'm doing it for.
Well, Robin, it's been like fabulous chatting with you.
It's an amazing pleasure for us to talk to you.
Thank you.
Hearing about
you
your
too.
process, and so
great. Well, it's really nice to meet you both in person.
Yes, it's it.
All right. Well, if you
for us, and I'm so looking forward to continuing to follow your creative output.
Yeah. I hope we'll see you live in Toronto. I know you played maybe 10 or 15 years ago here.
Yeah, it's quite a long time since I've been there. Yeah. But I'd love to come back.
For sure. Maybe we'll work on that.
Yeah. The idea of flying frightens me at the moment, but
okay. Well, no, and we have to
get over that.
It's not going to happen immediately, of course. Anytime soon.
We have to wait for all this to.
We're all hopeful for someday where the world can reconnect again.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, man. Take care.
Yeah. Cheers. Thanks a lot.
Cheers, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye now.
Bye.